Hey guys, this is Bryan from Fantasy Labs. Thanks for watching. In this video, I am going to go over the Vegas line movements for week 4. So I've compiled this spreadsheet and something I do every week for myself, and I think it's really helpful just to kind of track where teams are at. This is something that we obviously go over in the podcast on Wednesday nights, and I give you the over, under, and the spread and the implied points and everything. But I think it's also important on Saturday and Sunday to kind of keep track of where things are moving in the current spread, and even where the bets are at, and how that affects the implied points. So I kind of keep track of this myself, and I encourage you to do the same. I do want to show you, before we kind of get into this, I do want to show you how to access this information because we have it on our site. So if you just go to the regular site and you just go to the NFL part, you can just go to player ratings. And if you just click on really any player, bring up their player card, and then if you click on their team right here, it'll bring up the spread in the Vegas line movement. So it'll show you, okay, here's where it opened at. This is the current live, the current spread percentage, and that's the total number of bets that they've gotten, and over under, and then again the total number of bets they've gotten on the over under, and then also this is something that we auto update very regularly, and so you can see the actual movement over the week, which I think is really cool. So you can see, okay, if the line has moved pretty drastically, you can go in and see where it moved, or when it moved rather, and try to figure out why. So maybe if a player was ruled out, you can say, okay, that's probably why, because right after they announced, it's when it dropped. So I encourage you to kind of check these out, but I'll bring up the spreadsheet and we can kind of talk through this week and kind of what we're seeing. So we'll start just kind of and just go through these games. So the Jets Dolphins started, and that's the London game, and it started as a low over under, but it's actually currently moved up to 42.5. Even though the spread has gotten a little bit closer, so it's almost a pick 'em. It's just Jets -1. And interestingly enough, the Jets have actually lost a half a point, even though they've been getting the majority of the bets, so which has affected the implied points. And this is something that I know Adam Levitan, who writes for DraftKings and also does a lot of stuff with our news section, and he's written a lot of stuff about reverse line trends. So just what that means is that even though that a team is getting the majority of the bets, which they are here, so the Jets, so 68% of the number of bets in Vegas on the spread has been on the Jets. So normally you would think that would make Vegas move the line to the other way. So you would think that since they're getting so many bets on the Jets, that they would move it to maybe -2 as a way to try to balance out, because they obviously want to get bets on either side. So they want to have equal amounts of money on either side of their spread, so they can break even, so they're not like susceptible to a loss with either outcome, and then they can just make money on the vig. So obviously we know that if the spread is being bet, but it moves in the opposite direction, so that usually means that the sharp people in Vegas are making larger bets. So even though the number of bets is higher, people are making larger bets on the other side of it, which makes it move down. So and I think that's more important than just the general public, is to figure out where the sharp guys are at. And that's tough because so, sometimes these guys will make bets early on, and sometimes they will wait until 12:30 on Sunday afternoon, right before kickoff. And so sometimes you won't know exactly who they're on. Sometimes you do, and so that's tough to try to interpret. We can interpret it just based on kind of the reverse line trends on Saturday or Sunday, but sometimes they're waiting for a specific number that they want. Maybe they're waiting for it to get to whatever, and then they'll bet. And sometimes it doesn't make it down to that number until right before kickoff. So so it's tough to know, but we can definitely get some ideas of where things are going. So in reverse line trends, I definitely really take that seriously, just because that means that the sharp guys are on those teams. So the fact that, you know, the Jets are getting the majority of the bets, but they're actually moved down, means that you know, perhaps the sharp guys are on the Dolphins to win the game. Panthers at Bucks is kind of stayed the same. Which is, I guess, kind of interesting, because even though it hasn't had a reverse line movement, the Panthers are just getting a crazy high. They're getting 84% of the bets, and we're still not seeing any movement. So could be some bigger money on the Bucks, but this is probably a stay away, kind of either way, just because of the fact that the over under hasn't moved at all, and you know, these teams are still at really low team totals. Texas at Falcons is slightly moved down, but the Falcons have actually dropped by a full point on the spread. Again, this is another reverse line trend, because they're getting the majority of the bets, and they've moved a full point down. So obviously the sharp guys, or the big bettors, think that the Texans can keep it a little bit closer than that. So again, this is a situation where I might, you know, I'm not going to fade the Falcons by any means, but it is going to make me think about differently. Maybe I don't go so heavy on the Falcons in tournaments. You know, I think in cash games, you know, Devontae and Julio are still great plays, just because of the workload and the volume. But in tournaments, when I see reverse line trends, this one isn't crazy drastic, but if there was a drastic one, then I would, you know, really, that would make me think about it on Sunday morning when I'm finishing my lineups. Jags and the Colts has stayed the same. So not really any movement there. Again, that really depends on Andrew Luck's availability, and so that's something that I think we're just gonna have to wait. It looks like he is going to be a go, last I heard, but that's something we're gonna have to monitor tomorrow morning, because obviously that'll affect the line. Chiefs and Bengals has moved up 1 point in the over/under, even though it stayed the same as far as the spread. So really, the not much to say about the teams, obviously, because their implied points have moved up in tandem. But they just think that there's going to be, you know, maybe a little higher scoring than usual. Giants and Bills has moved down just a little bit, and that's been on the Bills. So it looks like the public thinks that the Giants have a chance to stay a little bit closer than that. I don't take away too much from that. I still think the Bills are great plays in cash and tournaments. Carlos and Tyrod are going to be the most popular, and I think that's probably deserving. Raiders and Bears has moved down slightly, and again, that's on the Bears, and it looks like the public's just way on the Raiders this week. I think there's some potential in tournaments to take maybe a couple of the Bears forte. I'm definitely high on in tournaments, because I think the public is just way too on the Raiders. And while it's probably warranted, because the Bears look fairly bad, I do think that this could be a good contrarian move, just because the public looks to be so much on the Raiders. The Eagles and Redskins has moved down a ton. This is a 3-point drop, and it's really just because of that weather situation. So that's something to monitor, just the weather as we approach game time, because obviously it's moved down because of people being worried about it. But you know, obviously that could change before tomorrow. So that's something to keep my eye on. I'm not going to take a whole lot from this until I definitively know kind of tomorrow morning, you know, where the weather is going to be at. Browns and Chargers has moved down just slightly, and that's on the Chargers side, even though the bets are fairly even. So this isn't a crazy reverse line trend. So I'm not going to take a whole lot from that either. Packers and 49ers. This one's a little bit interesting. So the over-under went up and the Packers went down, even though the Packers have they went down a full point, even though that they're getting a huge number of the bets at 81%. So I think this is where, you know, the sharp guys are saying that's a lot of points, especially on the road in San Francisco. You know, crossing time zones, and Packers on a short week because they played on that Monday night. And Colin Kaepernick has historically played pretty well against the Packers. So I think maybe this is where the sharp guys are a little bit more on the 49ers. Again, I think that's a potential to, you know, maybe look elsewhere in a tournament. I think the Packers are still really safe. Rodgers and Cobb and Jones are still really safe options in cash games. But and I don't think necessarily this means that the Packers are bad plays. It's just that it's probably not as drastic as that opening line, according to the big bets. Vikings and Broncos has moved down just a little bit. It's just been the Broncos have moved up to 7, and that kind of is reflected in the public. So nothing crazy there. Rams and Cardinals has moved up a full point, even though the spread has stayed the same. And the Cardinals are getting the big bet, so it looks like there's probably or they're getting the large number of bets. So it looks like there might be some money on the Rams to keep it close. The Cowboys and Saints have moved up a full point, and interestingly, so most of the spread percentages are on the favor team, except for the Giants and the Cowboys. So that's something I would monitor. And this is probably going to move just a little bit more, I would assume, because it just came out recently. So that's something I would monitor tomorrow morning. So the Cowboys have gotten, it's pretty close to 50%. I mean, 60% is not crazy high, but the line hasn't moved. So maybe a little people are on the Cowboys. And then the last one is the Lions and the Seahawks, and that hasn't moved at all. Seahawks are getting the majority of the bets, but this is another one where I'm not sure that it means a whole lot necessarily for the Lions and the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks are, it really is just going to depend on Marshawn's availability. So I think this line is probably going to be dependent on that as we get more information, and we may not get it tomorrow. It may be a true game time decision for Marshawn, whether he's playing on Monday night. So that's something that I'm not going to take a whole lot from, just because there's still a lot of factors up in the air about that. But again, this is something that I find helpful and interesting, at least to help me kind of make my decisions, especially in tournaments. It's not something where, even though there's been some reverse line trends on the Packers and the Bills, who are going to be the most popular plays, I'm not necessarily going to fade them in cash, just because I don't think that it necessarily means they're bad in cash, just that in tournaments it might be something to think about, where you maybe you want to have some exposures still to those guys, just because they're going to be such high value, and the fact that they're still low. Rodgers' price is down at 7,900, but it is something to look at in tournaments that the public's so much on them, but maybe it's going to be a little bit closer and not as high scoring, or maybe still as high scoring, but it's a little bit closer on the other side as the public thinks. So always in tournaments, it's good to be contrarian, to think about where the public's at and where you can get off the public, because obviously you want to win the tournament, because it's more top heavy, but I think that these are useful to try to figure out where the public's at and where the smart guys are at, and try to be more on the smart guys as opposed to the general public. So those are my thoughts. This is something that I just decided to do this week and show you guys kind of how I organize this. Let me know what your thoughts are. If it's something that you guys are interested in and find useful, then I'll keep on doing it throughout the year. And again, thanks for watching.